Welcome back to Blacklit Memory. Tonight's collection features 9 Appalachian horror stories rooted in reality, shaped by silence, and haunted not by ghosts, but by moments that never fully ended. You'll hear from hikers who returned without answers, locals who live beside the uncanny, and wanderers who looked too long at something they shouldn't have. These aren't stories about monsters. They're stories about places that remember. So before we start, hit like, subscribe, and share this with someone who still checks the tree line when the fog rolls in. Let me know in the comments which ridge trail or holler do you avoid after dark. Now settle in, the woods are listening. When I was 10, I let go of my brother's hand for a moment, and that was all it took. 22 years later, I stood again at the edge of Roan Mountain. My boots sunk into a tangle of wet pine needles, facing the same stretch of trail where Jamie disappeared. I'd returned before. In the early years, sometimes with rangers, sometimes alone, but this time was different. Now I was a certified trail guide, leading a group of 6 hikers along a portion of the Appalachian Trail. We'd scheduled a 2-day loop past the Carver's Gap area, with an overnight camp near Engine Gap. It wasn't supposed to be personal. I hadn't told the group about Jamie. No reason to burden them. Most of them were retirees or solo adventurers from out of state, drawn in by the fall foliage and the promise of crisp, clean air. We kept a good pace through the rhododendron thickets, stopping occasionally for water or to point out a patch of ghost pipe, blooming pale like bone. I carried the group gear, first aid, and my own quiet grief, folded tight in the bottom of my pack. But I'll tell you this, even after 2 decades, I still avoided that bend. There's a place near Roan High Knob where the trail narrows between 2 jagged outcroppings. And the mist there settles different. Not like cloud mist, this is denser, with a way of swallowing sound. Jamie and I were just kids, tagging along behind my uncle, when he slipped ahead on that bend and vanished into the fog. We thought he was playing a trick. I still remember my uncle shouting his name until his voice cracked. The dogs barking somewhere uphill. And me just standing there, listening. The silence was thick as water. This time, I hesitated when we got close, pretending to check my map. It was late afternoon already, and the fog had begun to roll in early, softening the edges of trees and blurring the underbrush. I suggested we stop to rest before the incline. The others agreed, settling down to snack and adjust their boots, unaware that just around the curve was the place I'd dreamed of, over and over, for years. Then the lights went out, one by one, like a cascade of dying stars. Every headlamp and flashlight in the group flickered, then died. I felt it first in my gut, that sudden lurch of something wrong. We were still surrounded by daylight, but under the dense canopy and growing fog, everything turned dim fast. One of the hikers laughed nervously, tapping her flashlight. Another cursed quietly. I reached for my backup dead. Then came the sound. At first, it was just leaves shifting, a rustle you'd expect. But then it stopped. Everything stopped. No birds, no wind, just a stillness that didn't feel natural, like the woods had gone breathless. I scanned the trail, heart hammering, and saw nothing, but I felt it. Something, someone, watching. I whispered for the group to stay put and stepped slowly toward the bend, instinct pulling me forward. The fog had thickened there, wrapped tight between the rocks like a mouth just barely open. My boots slipped once on the slick roots. I steadied myself with one hand against the stone, my breath shallow. I knew what I was doing was reckless, but I couldn't not go. Jamie had been 10, like I was. He might have thought it looked like a game. I stepped into the mist, and I swear just before I crossed the gap, I heard footsteps behind me. Not from the group. These were lighter, softer, familiar. "Jamie," I whispered. The air smelled like iron and wet moss. I turned. There was no one there, but the shape of a small footprint had formed in the soft dirt beside mine. Fresh. Still sinking. My stomach dropped. I backed away, almost tripping, heart in my throat. Then something moved behind the fog, a flicker of motion. Too quick to catch, and instinct took over. I ran, through the mist, past the bend, out toward the clearing where the fog thinned. I didn't stop until I heard the others calling my name behind me. I'd left them. I'd left him again. And even now, after all these years, I still go back sometimes. Not to find Jamie, I know better than that. But to look at that spot between the rocks, where the earth dips just enough to hold water, every now and then, when it rains just right. I swear I see a child's footprint appear again, like he's still out there, walking in circles, trying to find his way home. After that trip, I filed the incident like I'd done so many others, somewhere between memory and guilt. The hikers never asked what happened. Maybe they felt it too. Or maybe they were just glad the fog had lifted, their lights working again by the time we set camp. We finished the loop the next day in strained silence, and I made sure no one lingered near the bend. But I didn't sleep that night. I kept seeing the footprint. Clear, sharp heel. Toes curled slightly inward, just like Jamie's always had when he walked barefoot on the lake shore behind our childhood home. I used to tease him about it. And now, over 2 decades later, I couldn't shake the image of that same print reappearing beside mine, in the trail dirt, like he'd been right behind me, waiting. I told myself it could have been an animal, wind patterns, anything. But I didn't believe it. The real weight came after I got back home. I live in Johnson City now, a small rented place near the edge of the woods. Cozy. I keep my gear packed in a corner and my maps hung neatly on the wall. A week after Roan, I unrolled the topographic chart I'd used for the hike and found a faint, muddy smudge on the edge of the page. It was a child's footprint. Damp. Smelled like pine and earth. I hadn't noticed it before. I hadn't unrolled that map since we'd returned. I should have thrown it away, burned it, anything. But I didn't. Instead, I started walking again. Not full hikes, just local trails. A few miles here and there. But every time I stopped for water or took a break by a creek, I'd look down, and there it was, the same footprint. Not every day, not in the same place, but often enough that I started to dread those walks. The print never looked old. No erosion, no animal scatter, twigs across it. Fresh, intentional, like it was placed there after I passed. I tried to talk to someone once, a fellow guide, older guy named Ray, who'd spent half his life on the Blue Ridge trails, when I mentioned Roan and the lights going out. He just nodded and said, "Yeah, that's happened before." I asked if he'd ever seen footprints. He stared at me too long before saying, "Some folks don't stay lost, they stay looking." That stuck with me. I stopped leading groups after that. I told the outfitters I needed a break. Health stuff, stress. They didn't ask questions. I started avoiding trails entirely. Then the woods behind my place. But it didn't matter. The footprint it came anyway. Once, right outside my back door. Another time, inside my screened porch, where no dirt should have even gotten in. Always the same. Same size, same inward tilt. And then came the dreams. I don't mean nightmares. I mean clear ones. Walking the trail again, the fog thick around my ankles, and always hearing footsteps just behind me. A rhythm that matched mine, only half a second delayed, like an echo that had grown legs. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, and every time I'd find pine needles by my bed. I know how it sounds. I've heard the stories. Too guilt makes people see things. But this wasn't guilt. Or maybe it started that way. But it's more now. I've come to understand something I never wanted to admit. I didn't just leave Jamie that day. I abandoned him. And whatever's out there, whatever leaves those prints, follows me in silence. Wakes me in fog, it remembers that. It won't let me forget. I haven't seen his face since that day. Haven't heard his voice, not even once. But I feel him, like a presence tethered to mine, like he's walking just behind me, always a few steps back. And the worst part, some nights, I find myself walking out to the rocks again, the ones near that old trail bend. I stand there, looking down at the shallow dip where water gathers. I never bring a light anymore. Don't need one. Because I already know what I'll see. A single footprint, small, still sinking. And sometimes, next to it, a second print appears just as slow as if he's waiting for me to walk beside him again. It started with the static. I was hiking near Brown Mountain, North Carolina, nothing dramatic. Just a personal trip to gather photos and ambient audio for a blog post about the area's lesser-known ridges. I've been covering odd and remote places around the Appalachian corridor for over 5 years now. My name's Caleb, 34, full-time travel writer and part-time skeptic. I've walked through places where people swore they'd seen lights, heard voices, or vanished for hours. Most of it turns out to be local lore stretched too thin by time. But Brown Mountain was different. Not because of what I saw at first, but because of what I heard. The path I followed ran parallel to an exposed ridgeline that turned barren near the top. The GPS signal was patchy, so I had to back up a handheld unit with local mapping and an analog radio band I jury-rigged to record weather alerts or emergency signals. It's old school, but it's helped me track patterns and even pick up odd broadcasts I use as atmospheric sound for my posts. That afternoon, the sky was a dull gray, the light getting flatter as clouds thickened. I remember because it gave everything a washed-out, paper-thin look like the woods were fading into some kind of old photograph. The static hit as I reached a bare stretch of trail. No trees, just grass and stone and the quiet hiss of the wind. The handheld buzzed in short bursts. I assumed it was interference normal around some mineral-heavy ridges. But then a voice broke through. Clear, crackled, but firm. It wasn't a ranger or emergency alert. It was a broadcast. Local reports of the Brown Mountain lights continue. Residents are advised to remain indoors after sunset. My spine locked, because that signal was wrong. I was miles off-road, no towers in range, and the voice didn't match any station I had marked. I held the device up, and the sound got louder. Not clearer, just more present. like it was bleeding into the air around me. I checked the frequency. It wasn't on a real band. Just noise, layered with fragments of that report, and something beneath it that sounded like distant, overlapping whispers. I hit record, always do when something gets weird. The voice continued. Now slower, the lights are expected to reappear just past 1900 hours. Maintain visual cover. Then the signal cut. Not with a fade, just gone. I stood there, listening to the wind. The silence afterward louder than anything. My eyes scanned the ridge. I knew the story. Of course, the brown mountain lights. Strange orbs people claim to see moving along the ridges at night. Sometimes dancing, sometimes hovering. Most people chalked it up to swamp gas, headlights, or quartz reflections. I'd even written a piece debunking it once. But in that moment, I felt watched, not stared at. Observed like something was waiting to see what I'd do next. I started walking again. Slower now. The trail dipped into a patch of scrub pine, and the wind picked up with a metallic edge, like it was rattling through unseen wires. I kept glancing at the radio, hoping it would come back, hoping it wouldn't. A part of me wanted to laugh, but I couldn't. My hand was shaking too hard. That night, back at the cabin I'd rented nearby, I plugged the recorder into my laptop to review the audio. That's when I heard it buried in the hiss. At the very end, just before the signal dropped, a voice whispered, "Caleb, what did you bring with you?" I stared at the waveform, played it back again, slowed it, cleaned it. It was there. My name, my voice. Only I hadn't said a word all day. I didn't sleep that night, even with the doors locked and the recorder shut off. I couldn't shake the weight pressing on my chest, like something was still listening. I kept thinking about the voice, the way it used my name. Not like a recording glitch, not some radio interference parroting back sound. It said it with intent, with a familiarity that made my skin crawl. By morning, I'd almost convinced myself it was just a fluke stress, exposure, whatever. I packed my gear, wiped down the recorder, and left early. But as I stepped outside, something cold slid into me. Not the mountain air, this was different. My boots hit the gravel, and the first thing I noticed was the silence. Not just quiet. Silence. No wind. No birdsong. Just the faint tick of my watch. The static returned around mile 3. This time, the handheld lit up by itself. No buttons pressed, no power toggle. It buzzed to life with a low, rhythmic hum, like breathing through teeth. Then came the voice again. Not the news report. Just one, hollow, pulsing line. "We are still watching." I froze, not because of what it said, but because it wasn't coming from the speaker. It was behind me. I spun around so fast I almost lost my balance. Nothing. Just trees, damp earth, the brittle remains of summer leaves. But the breath was still there, warm. Somehow, too warm for mountain air brushing the back of my neck. I walked faster, then broke into a full sprint. No sound of pursuit. Just the crunch of leaves beneath my boots and the radio still whispering in my pack. I didn't stop until I reached my car. That night, I played the recording again. And this time, I didn't hear just my name. There was screaming. Short, sharp, like someone falling. Then a crash, and in between, gasping, struggling like someone was trying to speak but couldn't get the words out. I slowed the playback, amplified the background, and caught a final phrase before the silence swallowed it whole. They see through the static. After that, I stopped posting. I stopped traveling. I shut the blog down and moved further inland. I kept the recorder, though I don't know why. Maybe to prove it wasn't in my head. But sometimes, late at night, it turns on by itself. No matter where I am, no matter how far from those mountains. And through the hiss, I still hear the voice. Not asking questions now, just calling my name over and over. And outside, in the cold, I swear the air listens. We were halfway through Pine Creek Trail when I saw the backpack. It hung off a broken branch like someone had just set it there to rest, only no one ever came back for it. The strap was torn, fabric soaked through with old mud, and the entire thing dangled at a slant over the edge of a steep ravine. I slowed the car and pointed it out to the others. Anyone else seeing that, I asked. But my voice came out lower than I meant it to. A few heads turned from the back seat. We were 5 in total, 2 couples and me, the designated driver/guide for the weekend hike. I'm Marcus, 31, ex-park ranger turned part-time adventure tour host. I wasn't even supposed to take this group. But the original guide had gotten sick. I'd driven this stretch dozens of times before. Nothing about the trail had ever felt wrong until that moment. "Should we check it?" one of the girls asked. Her name was Tasha, curious, always snapping photos. I pulled over. Stepping out, I moved carefully toward the hanging pack. The earth felt soft, unstable from recent rains. I reached out and grabbed the dangling strap. The moment I pulled it up, a few things tumbled out, shattered glasses, a child's sock stiff with dried dirt, and a strip of faded yellow nylon, the kind you'd find on old hiking gear or search and rescue markers. I glanced around. Nothing. No footprints. No animals. Just the wind. I zipped it shut and turned back to the group. "Probably dumped," I said, forcing my voice steady. "Could be old. Storm runoff, maybe." But something in my chest tightened. That was the last time I saw Jeremy. He was the youngest of the bunch. Maybe 22. Not talkative, but polite. The kind of guy who kept to himself and always walked near the back of the group. We set out an hour later, winding up a narrow switchback. And somewhere after the ridge bend, he just wasn't there. One moment, I could hear his footsteps behind me. The next, gone. We called out, waited, doubled back. Nothing. At first, no one panicked. These things happen. People get distracted, take wrong turns. But we were less than 3 miles and no branches off the trail. It was a clean, single-track line. He couldn't have gone far. But we never heard a thing. Not a snap of twigs, not a slip of boots. Just silence. Deep, uncomfortable silence. Then we found the second backpack, lying right in the middle of the trail. Same style, same mud, half open. This one still had the yellow nylon tied around the zipper and a tag with Jeremy's initials. And the strangest part, we hadn't passed it before. I was sure. I was leading. The trail behind us had been empty, clean. This wasn't there before. I opened it slowly. Inside was nothing but a single child's glove, still damp, and a folded piece of trail map circled in red marker. I held it up to the others, and we all just stared. Then Tasha whispered, "Wasn't he right behind us?" Her voice cracked on the last word. I didn't know what to say. Because yes, he was. We searched for hours, split into 2 pairs, retraced the trail, called out until our voices grew raw. The tree line was dense on either side, but not enough to fully obscure someone. There was no underbrush disturbance, no broken limbs, no signs of a fall or exit path. It was like Jeremy had evaporated. I radioed in a report just before dusk, but the signal was weak, and I wasn't sure anyone even heard me. That night, none of us really slept. We set up camp in a small clearing by a shallow stream, the kind of spot that should feel peaceful. But the air was heavy, and the wind never stopped. It shifted in sharp bursts, like something breathing fast just beyond the tents. Every few minutes, someone's flashlight would flicker. Not drain out, just flicker, enough to make us look up, alert, waiting. Around midnight, we heard the low crunch of movement on the trail. At first, we thought it was Jeremy. I got up, heart hammering, and scanned the path with my light. But what we saw wasn't him. It was the backpack. Not the second one, not Jeremy's. The first one, the torn one. From the road standing upright now. Somehow, in the center of the trail about 10 yards out. Clean, no mud, like it had been freshly packed and set down gently. I approached it slowly, knees tight, adrenaline starting to numb my hands. I didn't want to look inside, but I had to. This time, there was nothing. Completely empty. Not even lining or thread. Just a hollow pack that felt too still. I looked back toward camp. No one had moved. No footprints around it. The dirt undisturbed. When I turned again, the bag was gone. Not moved, not taken, just gone. The beam of my flashlight skimmed across where it had stood, and the trail was bare. We left at first light. No one argued. We packed faster than I'd ever seen a group pack. No one spoke during the hike back to the cars. The sun came up behind us, but the woods still felt dim, heavy. As we passed the spot where the first backpack had hung, we found nothing. No bag, no torn strap. Just an empty branch and a strip of nylon caught in the wind, flapping, like something waving goodbye. Jeremy was never found. They searched for weeks. Helicopters, dogs, volunteer teams. Nothing turned up. No clothing, no gear, no trace. His family reached out to us. Of course, I lied. Told them he'd wandered ahead, lost the trail. I didn't say he vanished behind me. I didn't say the pack kept returning. I didn't say I still hear those footsteps sometimes. Just a few paces behind, when I walk alone. But the worst is this. A month later, a package arrived at my door. No return address, no markings, just a small, crushed cardboard box. Inside was the glove. The same child's glove I'd found in Jeremy's backpack. Still damp, still warm. It was the handprint that stopped me, flattened against the mossy top of an old boulder. It was darker than the surrounding stone, too defined, too human to be made by time or rain. I crouched beside it, brushing the edge with my glove, half expecting it to smudge or fade. But the shape remained. 5 long fingers. Slight taper at the wrist, no drag marks or animal scratches. Just a single, clean press. As though someone had placed their hand there and never moved again. My name's Ruby. I'm 39, Appalachian born. And I've spent the last decade chasing down folk legends across northern Georgia. Not the paranormal kind, not ghosts or witches, but the stories that thread through mountain towns like roots, old songs, lost trails, superstitions about stones and trees and voices in the fog. I record them, write them down, archive them in a little community-funded newsletter. I don't embellish, I don't have to. The people here remember enough on their own. This one was different. I'd come to Hightower bald after 3 separate interviewees mentioned something they called the Mother in the Mist. No details. Just a warning, don't linger near the Twin Rocks after sunrise. One old man said she watches for the ones who wander. Another woman refused to say more. Just made the sign of the cross and muttered about wet footprints on her porch. I thought maybe it was a distorted version of some Cherokee legend. Or maybe settler lore stretched over centuries. Either way, I went looking. I found the rocks just past a narrow ridge trail, shielded by thick rhododendron walls. The clearing wasn't marked on my map, but it felt intentional. 2 massive slabs, side by side, with a slight dip in the earth between them. The kind of place you'd expect to find a cairn or a carving. Instead, I found the handprint, and the air there was colder. Still, like the trees were holding their breath. I took a picture. But when I looked at the screen, the image was blurred. Not motion blur, more like the lens had fogged. I cleaned it, adjusted the settings, took another. Same result. I tried video, got static. My heart thudded louder with each failed shot. I've photographed crumbling barns, river graves, even so-called cursed trees, but I'd never had this happen. So I left. I told myself I had enough. I'd write it off as a strange patch of moisture, maybe a trick of shade and moss. I didn't go back to the rocks. I didn't even look over my shoulder. But when I got home and opened my bag to unload gear, the handprint was there again. This time, on the inside of my lens cover. I didn't touch the lens for a week, just left it sealed in a drawer, surrounded by silica packets, trying to convince myself it was some kind of condensation anomaly. But every night, I dreamed about that mossy boulder, not the shape of the rocks or the trail leading up, just the handprint. Perfectly still, etched into memory like it had been waiting for someone to see it. Every morning, I'd wake up with the same taste in my mouth, wet stone and metal. The first time the handprint showed up on my window, I didn't believe it. It was faint. Foggy 5 slender fingers pressed against the glass of my second-floor office. No smears, no dirt, just condensation pushed from the outside, like someone stood up there in the night air, watching. I lived alone. No ladder, no porch overhang. The window didn't even open all the way. I stared at it for 20 minutes before I finally wiped it clean. It came back 2 days later, clearer. That's when I started seeing her. Not directly, not fully, just fragments. A shape in the mist when I drove the back roads. A soft knocking sound from the woods behind my house on foggy mornings. Once, I caught my reflection lingering a second longer than it should have after I stepped away from the mirror. Each time it happened, I'd find the print again, always cold, always wet, and always perfectly formed. I stopped sleeping. Tried explaining it to a friend once, someone I'd gone hiking with before. She listened patiently, then offered to come stay the weekend, check the trail with me again. But the night before she arrived, I found a second handprint on the window, smaller, pressed directly beside the first. I didn't let her come. I tried cleansing the house. Sage, salt, traditional Cherokee smoke blend, nothing held. The fog started creeping in on clear days, like it was leaking through cracks in the sky. I even drove hours away, stayed in a motel by a dry lake bed in southern Alabama. But when I opened the curtains the next morning, it was there again, the handprint. Same angle, same pressure. That's when I stopped running. I returned to the rocks. Not for answers. I knew I wouldn't get any. I just needed to see if it was still there, if I hadn't imagined the whole thing. The trail was overgrown now, like it hadn't been walked in months. My GPS died halfway up the ridge, but I found it. The boulders, the moss, the dip in the earth. And now, not one handprint but many. Dozens, maybe more. Layered, overlapping, etched into the stone like a crowd had once stood there. Reaching forward, silently waiting. My legs locked, the air thickened. And then I felt it a hand, soft and cold, press against my back. I didn't turn around. I walked back to the trail. Slow, deliberate, never once looking behind me. And ever since that day, I've kept the windows open because now, no matter where I go, she leaves the prints on the inside. It started with the sound of a train that shouldn't exist. I was in Moonville, Ohio, a place mostly known for a decaying tunnel carved through old railway rock, now surrounded by overgrowth and shadow. The tracks had been pulled up decades ago. Locals said the last train passed through in the early 80s, but I wasn't there for the stories. I was there for footage. My name's Nolan, 32, independent documentary filmmaker, usually focused on abandoned spaces and overlooked towns. Moonville had the atmosphere I wanted, eerie but tangible, all rust and moss and silence. I arrived before dusk, scoped out the tunnel, set up a wide-angle camera on a tripod just beyond the northern mouth. The stone around the entrance was damp with decades of rain and shade. And the air had that thick, hollow weight to it, like sound had a harder time escaping here. I set up 2 motion-activated trail cams inside the tunnel and left them running overnight. Nothing fancy, just stillness. I wanted slow shots of creeping ivy, the kind of ambient footage that makes people feel like they're standing somewhere forgotten. But something felt off before the sun even set. The tunnel wasn't silent. There was a low humming, not constant, more like waves of vibration you feel in your chest. I chalked it up to wind, left the gear, drove 15 minutes to the nearest inn, and tried to sleep. Around 2:13 a.m., I woke up to a sound I hadn't heard since I was a kid visiting my grandfather's place. Near a rail yard, the rhythmic rattle of a distant freight train. But there were no trains here. Not anymore. Still, the sound grew louder. Not approaching, just present, like it was being piped through the walls. I grabbed my field recorder, held it near the window, and caught 35 seconds of low-frequency rumbling. Then a sharp screech metal on stone. Then silence. I replayed it. Not interference, not imagined. It was real. The next morning, I went back to the tunnel. The fog was still clinging low to the trees, and everything felt damp, like it had rained. Though the ground was dry, my gear was untouched. But the central camera, the one inside the tunnel, had been turned, slightly, off-center by a few degrees, enough to ruin the framing. I checked the footage, expecting darkness, dust, maybe a spider crawl across the lens. Instead, at 2:14 a.m., a faint light appeared deep in the tunnel, flickering, distant. It pulsed in and out, like a lantern swaying on a hook. Then a figure stepped briefly into frame. Motionless, barely illuminated, just an outline. And then it was gone. No sound, no movement, just a sharp drop in the ambient mic, like the air itself had been sucked away. That's when I realized the field recorder in my bag had been running, too, and it had captured something I couldn't explain. Back at the inn, I played the audio from the field recorder. The first 20 minutes were nothing but night sounds, crickets, distant wind, a soft rustle of tree limbs, but then came a low metallic grinding, like rusted wheels resisting motion. And underneath it, almost buried, was a voice. Not speaking, breathing. Long, strained exhalations that faded in and out, like someone pacing just out of frame. Then, at precisely 2:14 a.m., the recording shifted. There was a blast of white noise, sharp and sudden, and then a clear sound that made my skin crawl, footsteps on gravel. Inside the tunnel, steady, deliberate, one after another. The kind of rhythm that says whoever's walking isn't in a hurry because they don't have to be. I turned the volume up, leaned in close, and that's when I heard it, a single word, whispered so close to the mic it distorted slightly. Nolan. I stopped the tape. I sat there for a long time, just listening to the silence around me. No TVs, no cars, just the sound of my own breath, short and tight. I didn't go back to Moonville that night. I didn't go back the next day either. I checked out early and drove 5 hours north to stay with my brother. Didn't tell him why, just said I needed a break from filming. But the video stayed with me. I kept watching the clip from the tunnel, trying to catch more details, enhancing frames, adjusting exposure. I slowed the footage to 1/5 speed and found something I hadn't noticed before. The figure barely visible wasn't facing the camera at all. It was facing away, toward the far wall of the tunnel. And there, just at the edge of the frame, was the faint outline of a second figure. Much closer, much stiller. I don't remember filming a second angle, but somehow, this footage now had a reverse shot of me. Only it wasn't me. The shoulders were too narrow. The stance was wrong. And even in the grainy black and white, I could see the outline of a hand pressed against the tunnel wall with too many fingers. I deleted the file. I trashed the memory card, threw out the camera. But some nights, when I'm reviewing other footage, I still hear that same train in the background, just for a second. That slow grind of steel and gravel, impossible. Distant, followed by a whisper that never quite says my name again, but feels close enough to mean something. And the worst part, I know I'm the only one who can hear it. Because when I show the recordings to others, it's always silent, clean, no noise, no lights. Just me, and that one frame that never disappears, the one that shows me standing in the tunnel, staring at something no one else can see. We were 7 by the time we reached Flat Top Trail's 3rd clearing. 4 undergrads, 2 grad students, and me assigned as field supervisor for a long weekend research trip through a remote patch of West Virginia wilderness. The goal was simple document oral histories of local folklore and gather environmental samples for a cultural preservation project. Most of the group didn't believe in any of it, just college credits and Instagram shots of the mist-covered hills. I didn't blame them. I was 26 and only a year out of school myself, still learning how to lead with confidence instead of pretending I wasn't scared. The locals had warned us, though. They didn't call it a ghost, just the white figure or that thing near the ridge. Said it only appeared when someone was about to get hurt. Some whispered it came before accidents. Others swore it caused them One woman at the last gas station before the trail looked me dead in the eyes and said, "Don't stop if you hear crying. Keep your head low and don't call out to it." We laughed it off in the van. But something about the way the trail swallowed sound that day made me wish we hadn't. The air grew heavier the deeper we went. The trees here weren't tall, but they were close, tight clusters of gnarled trunks and wind-warped branches that creaked even when there was no breeze. The trail markers were faded and inconsistent. By the time we set up camp that second night, the undergrads were grumbling about the terrain, the bugs, the heat. I distracted them with stories, old lore about lantern lights and names whispered through trees. They liked that kind of stuff. I kept it light. Until the third night, when we heard the voice. It sounded like a child, soft, almost conversational, echoing faintly through the trees around 1:00 a.m., when most of us were still awake, sharing hot cocoa over the camp stove. We all froze. The fire popped once, and someone muttered. What the hell was that? I stood, trying to locate the direction. The sound came again, a short, stuttered call, not words, just a vocalization, high and small. Then the crying started. Not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet, helpless sobbing, off in the woods. The kind of sound that hooks something deep in your gut. We should have ignored it. One of the students, Bree, I think, stepped toward the trees. It sounds like a kid, she said, voice already too far ahead. I grabbed her shoulder and told her to stay close. Could be an animal, I said, or a trick of the wind. But I knew. We all knew. There were no kids out here, not this far in, not this late. Then we saw it. A small shape low to the ground, crouched beneath a bent tree limb just beyond our lantern's reach. Pale, still, dressed in something loose and fabric thin. It didn't move, didn't even look up. Just trembled. Bree whispered, "Is that a child?" But no one answered. Because right then, it stood up too tall, its limbs unfolding slow, deliberate. And in the firelight, it had no face, just a smooth, pale surface where a face should be. Then it turned and slipped behind the tree line. No sound, no rustle, like mist. We packed camp in under 10 minutes, but not fast enough. Because when we did our final head count, someone was missing. Jenna. Quiet, thoughtful, always carrying the journal. Her tent was zipped, her bag still there, but her boots were gone. And on the trail just beyond the clearing, hanging from a low branch, was a single child's sweater too small to be hers, wet, mud-streaked, and folded perfectly in half. We didn't split up. I knew better. Even if I hadn't seen what we saw, even if I hadn't heard the crying again. Softer now. Coming from somewhere further off trail, I still wouldn't have let anyone go alone. We stuck together, hiking in a tight group back toward the ranger station. It was a long descent, rough terrain, and Jenna's name never stopped echoing through the trees. No one responded. No answer. Just the occasional rustle or distant twig snap, always just enough to make us look back. We reached the base of the trail by noon. 2 rangers met us there, already alerted by spotty satellite messages we'd sent around dawn. We explained what happened, most of it, anyway. They took us seriously, but you could tell they thought it was just fear and exhaustion. People wander. Accidents happen. Fog plays tricks. But when they reviewed the map and realized there were no known alternate trails where Jenna could have gone, and that none of the wildlife cameras had picked up her heat signature, their tone changed. We stayed in town 2 more days, filling out statements. The search continued for a week. Nothing. Not a shred of fabric, not a single footprint. No animal signs, no blood. Her boots were never found. Not even the journal she always kept in her vest pocket. Just gone, like the forest had taken her. Months later, back at campus, we gathered to honor her. The university kept it quiet, treated it like an unfortunate accident. But those of us on the trip, we didn't talk much after that. We avoided each other in hallways. Something about sharing silence in a moment like that makes people carry the weight differently, and we were all carrying something. I moved off campus that winter. New apartment, new city, different trail systems. I stopped doing field work, just stuck to archiving. Every so often, though, I'd get a package. No return address, just a plain envelope or a thin box. And always the same thing inside. A scrap of child's clothing, wet, mud-stained, folded neatly. Once, there was a piece of paper tucked beneath a tiny sock. One sentence, written in smudged pencil. She cried until someone listened. I don't hike anymore, but I still hear it sometimes. Late at night, just beyond the window, soft crying in the wind. I was 13 when Dad first took me to Mount Mitchell. We camped near the summit, tucked in a pocket of spruce fir forest where the ground was soft and the air smelled like cold pine needles. That trip burned itself into my memory, not because of the mountain's size or the stars or the stories he told around the fire, but because it was the only time he talked about the brother I never knew. David, lost at age 15. Swallowed by the fog just 2 ridges over. The rescue team searched for 5 days. All they found were footprints leading toward a cliff, then nothing. I didn't understand then how that shaped my dad. He never blamed anyone. Never raised his voice when we talked about the woods. But there was a heaviness to him on that mountain, like the soil remembered things he'd rather forget. Every year after that, he returned to the area, alone. Usually in early spring when the fog was still thick and the trailheads empty. And every year, I'd wait to hear his truck roll back into the driveway, headlights washing over the front porch just before midnight. He passed 2 winters ago. Massive heart attack in the garage. I found his gear bag still packed by the door. Tent folded tight. Trail map marked in red across the same route he always took, looping just east of the ridge where David vanished. I didn't touch it for months. But this spring, I opened the pack and saw his handwriting in the margin. If she's ready, let her follow. I didn't tell anyone I was going. I went back to Mount Mitchell on the same weekend he always chose. Solo, light gear, same path. The fog started rolling in halfway up the trail. At first, it was thin, swirling at my ankles, rising like breath. I recognized the switchbacks, the old marker tree with the bent trunk, the overlook that now faced only white. It was quiet. Still, the kind of stillness that makes your own breath feel intrusive. And somewhere between the 6th and 7th mile, I began to hear footsteps behind me. Light, measured, not echoing, responding. At first, I told myself it was an echo. Loose gravel shifting under my boots. Sound bouncing off wet stone. But the rhythm was off. Whoever or whatever was back there wasn't in sync with me. It paused when I paused. It moved when I moved. and every time I turned, I saw nothing but thick fog and crooked branches swaying in silence. I didn't call out. I don't know why. Maybe part of me knew that, if I gave it a name, it would answer. By the time I reached the ridgeline, my lungs were tight with cold and memory. This was where the prints had ended, where David's trail went silent. I crouched near a rock ledge and scanned the mossy ground. There, just beneath the slick leaves, were faint impressions, not deep, not recent, but unmistakable. I counted 3 full prints before they vanished into the fog, like everything else. Then I heard it. Not footsteps this time. Breathing. Slow. Shallow, like someone standing just beyond reach, trying not to make a sound. My heart kicked. I stood up fast, scanning the mist. "David," I whispered. No answer. But the breathing stopped. I turned and began to walk, not running, not panicked, but faster than before. My body humming with something between fear and instinct. The fog thickened as I descended, wrapping around my shoulders, coiling through the trees. And still, I could feel it, a presence just behind me, keeping pace, not rushing, just following. When I reached my car, I didn't look back. I climbed in, shut the door, and sat there for 10 minutes with my hands gripping the wheel. The forest behind me stayed quiet. No sound, no birds, no wind. Just a stillness that pressed against the windows like it wanted to come inside. I drove home that night and didn't unpack. Didn't sleep either. But in the morning, when I stepped onto my porch to get the mail, I noticed something. In the soft dust beside the welcome mat, a single footprint. Bare. Toes curled slightly inward. The exact shape I'd seen in the trail dirt near the ridge. I didn't clean it. And I've started hearing those steps again, not just on trails, but in my house. At night, on the stairs, just past the doorway. Always keeping pace, always one step behind. "You don't stop if someone calls your name in the woods," the man said, voice low and steady, like he wasn't just repeating a warning, he was remembering it. I was crouched near the trailhead, tying my boots, half listening as he leaned against the porch railing of the Elk River Trail office, staring into the trees like something might emerge at any moment. Doesn't matter if it sounds like your mother. Doesn't matter if it is your mother. You don't stop. You don't answer. I gave him a polite nod, trying not to roll my eyes. I'd heard plenty of local legends from towns like this, enough to know they were mostly for show. Still, the way he said it stayed with me longer than I expected. I'd been running Elk River Trail since spring, part of a stubborn post-breakup routine I built to keep myself from falling apart. 10 miles total, 5 out, 5 back. The woods here had a steady rhythm, like breath you could match to. Clean air, narrow trail, no cell signal, no noise, no one to run into. And it was the kind of isolation that didn't feel lonely, just still. I always started late, close to sunset. I liked how the shadows stretched, how the air cooled fast as soon as the sun dipped behind the ridge. That evening, the fog came early. It wasn't thick, just a soft haze hanging low across the trail, blurring the roots and stones, but never fully hiding them. I kept my headlamp on low and ran by muscle memory, weaving through familiar turns. I could hear the river off to my right, a quiet, steady hiss behind the trees. Everything felt calm, balanced, normal. Then I heard my name. "Tyler!" It wasn't loud, not panicked or shouted, just spoken clear and close like someone standing 15 feet ahead in the mist. I stopped running, not because I was scared, not yet, just confused. I don't usually see anyone out that late, and no one should have known my name. I waited, breathing hard, turning my headlamp up slightly as I scanned the trail. Nothing moved. No footsteps, no crunch of leaves, just quiet fog. Then I heard it again. Tyler, softer, slower, right on the edge of a whisper. My skin tightened, the kind of chill that hits before your mind catches up. I turned in a slow circle, sweeping the beam of my light across trees, brush, fog. Nothing. No voice, no person, just the sound of my own breathing. I took one step backward, and something pressed against my back. Flat, cold, wet, the shape unmistakable 5 fingers, a palm, a hand not imagined, real. I spun around so fast my headlamp bounced against my forehead, throwing light wildly through the trees. The trail behind me was empty. No footsteps, no rustling branches, just fog drifting between trunks like smoke. But the feeling lingered, that distinct sensation of pressure on my back. I reached over my shoulder and touched the damp fabric. Still wet, still warm. Somehow, I took a breath and told myself to run. But I didn't. Instead, I walked slow at first, then faster. Not because I thought I could outrun whatever that was, but because moving was the only thing I could do to keep from panicking. I didn't hear the voice again, didn't feel the hand again, but the woods had gone dead quiet. No insects, no birds. Even the river sounded like it had pulled away, leaving only space behind. When I reached my truck, I didn't look back. I climbed in, locked the doors, and sat in the dark with my hand on the ignition, heart pounding against the seat belt. I didn't start the engine for 10 minutes. I just kept staring at the dashboard like I might forget how to leave. Eventually, I pulled out, headlights cutting through the fog, the trail swallowed up behind me. At home. I stripped the shirt off and threw it into the sink. I didn't want it near my bed. When I flipped it inside out, I saw a handprint, pressed into the fabric like water had soaked through fingers. Perfect shape. Too large to be mine. The edges still damp. I washed it twice, bleached it, let it dry. But the next morning, when I pulled on a clean hoodie, I felt something cold bloom against my back, that same pressure, same spot. I grabbed my phone and used the camera like a mirror. There it was again, a handprint. Each day since, no matter what I wear. I find it there faint in the morning, sharper by night. Some days, it fades entirely, gives me false hope, then comes back darker the next. I've stopped running, stopped going near trees, but none of that matters. Because last night, it wasn't just on my shirt. It was on the bathroom mirror. Inside, 5 fingers drawn in condensation, as though someone had been standing behind me while I brushed my teeth. And this morning, I woke up to the voice again, just outside my bedroom door, calling my name, waiting for me to answer. I told myself it was just a detour. The basin was flagged again on the erosion reports. And I happened to be the closest surveyor assigned to this quadrant of the forest. The Forestry Service keeps records neat, rotated, and regularly reviewed, especially in areas like Cragline Ridge, where water runoff can damage nearby trails. Nothing out of the ordinary, nothing that needed to feel personal. But the moment I saw that basin's coordinates, the hollowed-out patch of land sloping deep below the southern edge of the ridge, something in my chest locked up. 6 years ago, Mark went missing down there. We were working the same team, a 2-person crew covering soil mapping and hydrology sampling for a private environmental contract. He was methodical, quiet, sharp in ways I admired, but didn't fully understand back then. He always seemed to be listening to something deeper than what our instruments could measure, like he could read the ground through silence alone. That morning, he volunteered to take the basin, said it looked strange on the topographic overlay. That was Mark's word for anything he couldn't explain right away, strange. He radioed in once, around 11:40 a.m. "There's something down here. It's carved," he said. Voice flat, but with a tightness I'd never heard from him before. Then nothing. No static, no broken transmission, just gone. We filed the alert immediately. Rangers came in by dusk. Dogs, search teams. They spent days combing that basin, fanning outward in slow, deliberate sweeps. All they found was a patch of disturbed soil near a root system. A half-torn sleeve from Mark's field jacket caught in a ring of brambles, and one shattered compass about 40 yards from where he'd last radioed. No blood, no body, no signs of a fall. The slope wasn't steep enough to hide someone for that long, and there were no caves or crevices marked on any map. Eventually, they called it a misadventure. Likely fall, maybe a sinkhole. The land shifts down there. Someone told me, as if that made it easier. After the report closed, no one requested to work that basin again. I avoided it. Too, not out of fear, not really. More like respect. Like whatever happened to Mark had folded that place in on itself, and we were just smart enough not to pry it open again. Until now. The request came last month, buried in a routine trail inspection memo. Satellite imaging picked up new drainage patterns that looked unstable. I was already in the cragline region doing stream sampling. The hike would only take a day, maybe 2 if I needed to set up temporary erosion markers. I accepted the assignment without saying anything to my supervisor. I didn't want to explain why my hands were shaking slightly when I clicked confirm. I packed light, standard gear, no unnecessary tools. I told myself this would be clinical, just data collection. I wouldn't go deep, just enough to check the terrain, flag any structural issues, and leave. The hike in was quiet. Early spring, not much ground cover, no tourists on the upper ridge. As I descended, I noticed the shift in the air, cooler, dense, like something under the canopy was pulling breath from the forest itself. The last 30 yards felt slower, not physically, mentally, like the trees leaned closer, like the slope stretched longer than it should have. I reached the bottom after almost 40 minutes, though the GPS said it shouldn't have taken more than 25. And there, at the basin's edge, where the soil darkened into thick loam near the base of an uprooted pine, I saw it. A survey marker. Orange plastic. Clean and upright, the exact kind we used 6 years ago, and staked into the earth as if it had never moved. I stood over it for a long time. It was identical to the ones Mark and I used, same worn ridges, same notched base for anchoring into soft soil. But it shouldn't have been here. Our team had packed out everything after the search. I remembered specifically marking that basin as cleared in our records. Even if someone had missed this one, it shouldn't look like this, not fresh, not perfectly vertical. not with the paint still glossy in the low light filtering through the trees. I crouched and touched the plastic. It wasn't just free of rust, it was warm. Not like something that had sat in the sun, more like it had been held. Recently. My breath caught on as I looked around. Nothing but dense root systems and old erosion scars. No tracks, no prints, not even animal disturbance. I pulled out my field recorder and pressed the button, but instead of the usual beep and status tone, all I got was static. Low, constant, broken only by something that didn't sound like feedback. It was more like scratching, soft and rhythmic, like something burrowing just beneath the mic's threshold. I turned it off, restarted. Same sound. I set it down, suddenly aware of how loud my breathing had become. Then I noticed the roots, just beyond the marker, where the slope leveled slightly. A wide system of cedar roots had been stripped, not broken, not rotted, peeled, in long spiraling strips, as if something had bored upward from below. The bark curled outward like wood shavings. Clean and dry, no signs of bugs, no claw marks. Just those strange, perfect spirals. A sharp pressure built behind my eyes. I stood and backed away. My boots felt heavier than they had minutes earlier, like the ground was tugging just enough to slow me down. The fog started to slide in, though it hadn't been forecasted, curling low and thick across the loam. I turned toward the slope and climbed, faster than I meant to. Didn't take readings, didn't mark a waypoint, just moved. The climb out took longer. By the time I reached the trail above, my watch said I'd been down there nearly 3 hours. The descent had taken 40 minutes. The math didn't add up. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I kept checking my pack for that marker, afraid it had somehow come with me. It hadn't. But I could still feel the warmth of it in my palm. Back at my cabin that night, I downloaded the recorder. The static was still there, but now it was layered. The scratching came in waves, and underneath it, faint but clear, was a voice. Only one word. Elena. It repeated twice. Then the static swallowed it whole. Since then, I haven't been able to sleep properly. Not near trees, not when it rains. I hear that scratching sometimes, beneath floorboards, behind walls, like something tunneling slowly upward. It's subtle, but constant. The forest didn't take mark all at once, and I think it's testing how long it can wait for me.